Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining our webinar. Welcome. Today's webinar is on a multi-generational workplace and marketplace. This webinar is an extension of an article I wrote in the JVN Journal this past spring. It's the feature article called Clash of the Generations. And the basis of this discussion will be the differences between the generations as well as life stages. As way of introduction, my name is Stephanie Johnson. I am a senior manager at JVN Consulting. I've got over 10 years of experience spanning industries from technology to entertainment to financial services. Before we begin, just a few logistical items. This webinar is scheduled to last approximately 30 minutes. We'll do a Q&A session at the end, and if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please submit them in the comments. So for the first time, we are seeing 4 generations working together and 5 generations sharing market space. If you were to do a Google search or just look at some headlines, it would appear that there's great turmoil, particularly between baby boomers and millennials. But what I was finding is it wasn't aligning with what I was seeing in my personal experience. For example, I had mentors, employers, and clients that were working to ensure the success of all employees, not targeting a specific generation. I also saw lots of clients and even my own employers creating a specific environment, whether that was through office design with open concepts and bright colors, or offering more flexible working options such as remote and flex schedules. The spaces and schedules, that would largely be described as a quote-unquote millennial focus. But largely their employees were Generation X and boomers. I also saw that companies were implementing new technology, but everybody was using it. It wasn't just the younger generations. And it made me want to research more about the topic and understand why I was seeing things that were different than the headlines that I was reading. So as you take a look at what the generations are, who the generations are, there's a lot of different definitions in terms of years. However, I found the ones that we'll be discussing here to be the most common, and the research presented here is aligned with these definitions. So the generations at a high level include traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z. These 5 groups range from younger than 15 to over 70. They have very different priorities and perspectives, but each brings with it significant expertise and buying power. Understanding what drives these different groups can really help employers and marketers understand the true differentiators and better retain talent or target products. I'm going to walk us through a brief description of each of these generations. We'll start with the traditionalists. So this group has witnessed and experienced more advances in culture, technology, and human rights than any other generation we're going to discuss today. As an example of how much change this group has experienced, consider that many of these people grew up without electricity, and now they're using iPads and cell phones on a daily basis. They are the 70 and older group, and some are still in the workforce in the capacity of an employee, an advisor, or they may be in their second career. Their view on work is that loyalty to a company is very important. Many of these folks are receiving pensions for time that they dedicated to their employers. They've always had a heavy focus on getting results and punching the clock. Many are retired, and they're trying to stretch money to last longer than expected lifetimes. So they're spending about $800 billion annually, and this generation is spending large amounts of that on healthcare and retirement activities. Next, we have the baby boomers. They're aged between 51 and 70. They're the second largest U.S. population with 77 million members. Many of the baby boomers are approaching retirement, but they're currently in the top position of their career. They've largely created the workplace we know today in the United States, inspiring movies like Wall Street and Glengarry Glen Ross. They have a live-to-work mentality focused on hard work and visibility. They really created the burning the midnight oil and the 70-hour work week. Right now, they're more focused on leaving their legacy and being ready for a leisurely retirement. The boomers have spent their whole lives working hard, often giving up family time to do so. So they are ready to retire. They are the biggest spenders of the generations, averaging $2 trillion annually. They're not really well known for saving. They're more known for credit card debt and buying lots of big houses and cars. The boomers are interesting in that while many are not yet retired, they may be among the first who won't have a pension on which to retire. And then next we've got Generation X. They're between the ages of 36 and 50, and they've got 61 million members. Generation X is known for being fiercely independent and trusting. They grew up during the dawn of dual-income homes and rising divorce rates, which led to many having more responsibility in the home and daily routine than previous generations. From a workplace perspective, they're currently hitting their stride in their careers, and they're approaching leadership positions. Gen Xers are hard workers whose insistence on work-life balance inspired things like flex schedules and flex time, and they also insist upon technology to work remotely. Their motto is really work smarter, not harder. They're focused also on merit and receiving credit for the work that they've done. They expect feedback so that they can improve. Many experts believe that this will be the first generation to work until at least 70 because of financial requirements, not because of a desire to continue to work. With an annual spend of approximately $125 billion, that really demonstrates their smaller size as a population in comparison with the other generations, but also their propensity to save. Right now, they're really trying to make certain they can retire by saving via multiple channels. However, with a median age of 45, Gen X is currently in the midst of what's historically been the highest spending age group. So we'll be watching to see if they continue to save as diligently as they have so far. Next, we have the Millennials. By U.S. population, this is the largest group with 92 million members. They're between the ages of 15 and 35. They're also known as Gen Y, the entitled generation, and digital babies. They are the most diverse and educated generation the U.S. has seen yet. They do have a fairly wide age range from a career standpoint, with the younger millennials just getting started and the older millennials really starting to hit their stride. But all along, they've been the driving force that's now changing the workplace. They're very tech savvy, with many never having known a period of time without cell phones and tablets. Their reliance on this technology has made them one of the first generations that is always working, since work can be accessed from anywhere. Millennials really want an engaging career, but not necessarily all with the same employer or in the same industry. The Great Recession really impacted many millennials' job prospects, so one of their biggest concerns is finding a job and achieving financial stability. Within the workplace, they are focused on getting results, working collaboratively, and achieving work-life balance. This is really a combination of traits from 3 previous generations. They've got a work-to-live mentality. They need work to afford the lifestyle and activities that they want to do. And they want to leverage tools to make their work easier, especially technology. Millennials currently spend approximately $200 billion annually. Financial stability is a goal, and millennials understand that they have to create their own retirement fund. But they're still not saving as much as they should be. They are putting off large purchases like cars, homes, and getting married until they're more financially established. And the last generation we'll talk about today is Generation Z. So these are 15 years old and younger. It's a generation that's still growing, but is anticipated to be approximately 25% of the population. They're already beginning to train and search for their dream career. Most of Gen Z will enter the workforce with relevant experience, graduating with honors, and having been involved with multiple community groups. They are highly educated, and they're going to be extremely tech savvy. While these folks obviously are not holding down their careers yet, they are already directing approximately $44 billion of their parents' money, and maybe some of their own. They're influencing purchases of clothing, media, grocery shopping, and wellness products. They're already preparing to be the most informed set of consumers yet. So now that we've had a brief introduction, let's talk about the clash in the workplace. So the general hypothesis in the workplace is that the generations don't work well together, and employers need to cater to each generation individually. But when you really look at what's in front of you here on the screen, you can see that many of these characteristics are cumulative. So the traditionalists really taught the boomers hard work. The boomers taught Gen X about collaboration. Gen X taught millennials about work-life balance. And now you have a group of millennials that are looking for careers that allow them to work hard in a collaborative environment while using technology to gain work-life balance. So understanding that evolution, it can be inferred that the generations are not that different. All of the generations do want to keep learning. Understanding what they need to learn and the amount or frequency of education available is key to retaining employees of any generation. And all of the generations understand the need for technology, and they're willing to learn to use it. Technology allows for flexibility and work-life balance, as well as getting things done more quickly, which is something that really all of the generations want. And all of the generations work hard, but they're motivated by different concerns, whether that's retirement, moving up the career ladder, or just being able to learn how to do something really well. And all of the generations, of course, want some form of recognition. Understanding what kind of recognition is very important. This is a key driver in how long an employee stays with an employer. Millennials and Gen Z have stated that 3 years is long enough to learn a role at an employer. Without appropriate recognition, they may leave and go elsewhere. Generation X really pioneered job hopping due to being overlooked from a merit perspective. It's not something that employers would want to repeat with the future generations. What makes employees different from one another largely can be attributed more to life stages than generations. And a life stage is really a period in a lifetime that's defined by the events that are happening at that time. So here are some examples. Someone could be in a single new professional life stage where they're eager to take on new work, very ambitious, looking for challenges to climb the ladder. Somebody could be in the life stage of a married homeowner that's a professional. They're still eager, but they understand their financial responsibilities equated with providing for a family. And then you've got a lot of people that fall into the life stage of they've got children and they're a professional, so they really want to be home with family, but they also need to provide. So they want to do well in their career, but needs that balance to be a really good family member. And then another life stage is approaching retirement. You want to make sure a successor is in place and that you're financially able to retire. So now we've heard a little bit around sort of these key life stages. You can see how key life events such as marriage, home ownership, having children, retirement can drive behavior more than belonging to a specific generation. In the marketplace, we see something a little bit different happening. So marketers are not focused on generations as much as employers are. They're really focusing in on individual marketing. An example of individual or customized marketing is really when you go on a site like Amazon and it recommends products based on searches and previous purchases. We do see some generational marketing, mostly in the hospitality industry. We've seen recently some millennial hotels that have been popping up, allowing for a group of individuals to feel like there will be more people like them there. Otherwise, we're really just not seeing much generation-specific marketing. But there are lessons to be learned about consumers based on some general generational observations. First, there's price sensitivity. This can also be associated with life stages. The more financial responsibility you have means the less disposable income. And those approaching or in retirement may also be more price sensitive. Brand loyalty has evolved over time. So JBN actually hosted a panel event here in Charlotte where we had a financial services institution, a retail group, and an educator be on a panel to talk a little bit about this. And brand loyalty was one of the examples that we had. For the older generations, what we heard was that they were really more focused on getting a good deal. An example is with the financial services institution, they had a great introductory rate, and so boomers and traditionalists were the first to join despite it being a non-traditional bank. Another example is that quality became a pain point for Generation X, and they would rather stick with what they know. And for the example there, the retail group that we had has been in business for over 80 years, and they would rather stick, the Generation X crew would rather stick with what they know, and it showed during the recession when this particular company didn't see a drop in sales during the recession because the consumers knew the product quality and continued to make those purchases. Technology is also changing brand loyalty. You now have the ability to go and review quality based on others' experiences, leading to more exploration into other brands, especially within the Millennials and Generation Z. But they still want that quality and are looking to peer reviews to understand where they can find it. Technology has really changed how all of the generations shop. They're not just reading reviews, but they're also price shopping prior to a purchase or even prior to going to a store. Social media has also become a significant outlet for marketers to reach their consumer base. We saw this across the panel. All of the generations want to have some form of personal experience, and social media really allows marketers to provide a semi or fully customized experience. And lastly, when we talk about sort of this clash in the workplace, we'll look at customer segmentation. When you break down your customers into segments, life stages really are more prevalent on the market side. For the Millennials, that bucket is so broad. You really have to understand where they are in their life and careers to get them the goods and services that they need and want. And also, this idea of life stages and customer segmentation offers marketers and companies the ability to leverage data from the technology being used, provides marketers a better way to understand their customers and provide an experience that works for each individual. So what are the true differentiators in both the workplace and the marketplace? Well, there's only a few general differences between the generations that we're really seeing. There are views on time in the workplace, technology, learning, and retirement. For employers, there needs to be a heavy focus on creating a strong learning and development program that incorporates multiple learning delivery methods and ties them to varying incentives. Learning and development should be part of a holistic human capital management plan. This can really help employers understand what incentives should be offered and how to manage flexible time for employees. It will differ by life stage and generation. For marketers, there's really a focus on individual customization, and that's going to be the way of the future. So understanding how to work that into your customer strategy is key. A better understanding of customer uses of social media and their perspective on price can lead to understanding the appropriate product mix and marketing campaigns. Underlying both the workplace and marketplace is the heavy emphasis on technology. Employers and marketers will need to understand how to reach people across multiple platforms, including social media outlets and more traditional delivery methods, such as in-person and written communication. Technology will allow for data collection and a better understanding of the employee and/or consumer. A seamless and cohesive transition between all of these channels will prove to be important, especially as Generation Z comes onto the scene. They're already predicted to be numbest to constant media, as they've always experienced significantly more than previous generations. As I mentioned earlier, Gen Z will also be the most informed set of consumers yet. They are going to prove to be the next generation that changes everything, and they are coming soon. So thank you. This concludes sort of the presentation portion. We'll take a few minutes to answer any questions that you have. Okay. So one question is, with millennials being more interested in entrepreneurs and boomers looking for second careers or open positions, do you see millennials hiring boomers or other older generations? Great question. I don't have data on this, but I can infer from the research I've done that they would absolutely hire older generations. I think millennials are beginning to get the perspective that they can learn a lot about various industries by getting somebody with experience. But they will be looking for a good cultural fit. So the boomers or Gen Xers or whichever older generation would be working sort of in these more entrepreneurial companies would need to be on board with things like a very different office design maybe than what they're used to, or more flexible work hours, the amount of technology used, maybe some of the other differentiators we've discussed in the webinar. The other question I have here is, you briefly touched on how millennials were impacted by the Great Recession. With many economists predicting another downturn happening soon, what can we expect from the generations? This is a great question. We actually talked about this quite a bit at the event we hosted and got really a holistic view of various audience responses to the recession and determined that this really is more aligned to life stages than generations. When the Great Recession hit, largely everybody tried to save more. But depending on where they were in their life, they didn't avoid making large purchases if it was something that they needed. So I think, in the event of another downturn, we could expect more of the same. From a workplace perspective, I think those who typically have the largest salaries would be impacted in terms of cost-saving initiatives and potential layoffs, which right now would typically be those that fall into the boomer category. But that's not to say that there wouldn't be more merit-based assessments that would be happening as well. And then lastly, for folks who are not employed at this time, I think it's likely we'd see a return to education for graduate degrees and masters, just as we did in the Great Recession, to hold people over until there was more opportunity. All right, well, that's all that we have today. For anyone else that submitted questions that we didn't have time to address, I'll reach out to you individually. Thank you so much for participating in this webinar. For more information on this topic and many others, please visit jbn.com.